This story started in New York at the end of 2014 when I was contacted by Sir Richard Curtis, who's known from films like Love Actually and Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill, etc. And he started to talk to me about this plan that was going to come. And he said that this plan is totally going to fail unless we can make it popular. And if we can make it popular, then it can have a chance. So in December 2014, I got this document, Road to Dignity, Ending Poverty, Transforming All Lives, and Protecting the Planet. And I guess we can all sign up on those marching orders. So this is how it looked. And I was wondering, okay, how can I make this popular? And this is much more fun. In the beginning, when I gave this presentation, when not everyone had seen the goals, it was a bigger transformation. But this is how we got there. I looked at it and I was saying that complexity is good because it means that everything, the world is pretty complex and we can't ignore that because then you get a lot of politicians who just says, stupid things, but we gotta like the complexity, but we also have to realize that complexity is really hard to understand. So how do you take something that is very complex and try to make it understandable for everybody? So the first step is to think about the language. And when I started to think about the language of this document, it was just because I didn't understand it. I could understand the sentences, but I didn't understand how it was put together, how it formed a whole. So we started to take all of the type from the original 17 goals and said, can we make this even shorter, even easier? And I had been working for 20 years in advertising, so that wasn't such a hard thing. And poverty in all its form everywhere, there could just be no poverty. That's no big deal. Then you have things like end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Well, let's call that no hunger. That became zero hunger because of an initiative that Ban Ki-moon had started. But make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Well, that's about sustainable cities and communities. So I started to understand these things little by little. And then it was also about creating something that you could talk about easily. And then when you come to the higher number of the goals, for some reason the texts get longer. So here we are at goal 15, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainable managed forest, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. That's very hard to tell someone, like, what do you care about? What are you working for? Because you have to have this little note and say, wait a minute, I'm going to read here for you. So that became Life on Land. So all of the goals went through this process of trying to figure out what is the essence of the goals. When we had done that, we said, let's make a visual language for this. So we started sketching for this. And it's a lot of fun, but it's also very hard sometimes. So this was the first stab we took at it, and this is what we walked up to the UN with in February. Some of the names have changed. Some we got right. I think only a couple of icons, 3 icons, are there. For some reason, life below water, we kind of nailed that directly. Boom. But a lot of things were also abstract to talk about. And then we learned things, no hunger. We thought that it was really cool that it was an X. Let's not have any more hunger. And then someone said, yeah, but only a third of the world's population is using a fork. So then we did another stab at that. No poverty, that was really hard. Like, how do you make a symbol for something that doesn't exist? It's like, and I like the idea that it would be an arrow that was going up, because that was positive. And then I was thinking a family with a roof. That seems good. But then it came issues like, how does a family look today? We had also used 6 colors, because we thought 6 colors, that's going to be a lot. But then we realized that people started to group goals together in weird ways. So we said we probably need 17 colors. And I think this is officially one of the biggest color palettes of the design world. I don't know how many of you have design experiences, but it's not that often. You usually have 2, 3, or maybe 4 colors. And then it was easier to separate them. Still some things we had to work on, but we ended up with this. And I could do a presentation that takes an hour only about every single icon and the idea behind them. But we leave that for now. So then we knew we needed a brand, and we were thinking about the 17 goals as a unity of how they fit together, and we started to look at things that seemed like was nice symbols. This one out, and then we worked with that, and we liked that it was a planet. It's a sun, it's unity, and there was that. By the way, we also changed the name because they're called the SDGs, and that we didn't see that people would be like, rah, rah, SDGs, rah, rah. Global goals felt something that everyone can understand and support. And this is pretty much what engagement looks like when you go to the UN building. And really good people, like amazing people everywhere. But it's not that much fun. And if you're going to get people with you, you have to have positive vibrations. So we wanted it to be something more like this. So that has been our goal with all of the communication we create for the goals. So we know that there are 17 goals, and if you have, depending on how well you know the goals, you're going to realize that they cover everything. But they're also very like, okay, so how can we make some action around it? It's good to say that we should have no hunger, but how do you get there? It's good to say that we should have democracy. How do we get there? Peace and justice. And this is when we started to look at, so the 17 goals explains what we must care about, but they don't tell us what to do. But as we just heard, there was a lot of really smart people and a lot of work getting into this. So they also gave us 169 targets. So after we had done this, and I was so excited about it, I said, let's do the targets. And people said, you did 17 symbols. Are you going to do, and names, are you going to do 169? That's impossible. Don't do it. But we still said that that's where the solutions are. And I was worried that these would just be like stickers you put on your car and then nothing happened. So this is actually not the 169 targets, but this is what it felt like when you looked at them. And when you're looking at this much information, then you realize that information is not communication. The world is full of information, and you can just say, well, Google it, and you're going to find so much there, so you don't know really what you're going to go for. And to illustrate how much information is not communication, we can look at target 17.6, and it goes like this. Are you ready? Enhance north-south, south-south, and triangular regional and international cooperation on and access to science, technology, and innovation, and enhance knowledge sharing on mutually agreed terms, including through improved coordination among existing mechanisms, in particular at the United Nations level, and through a global technology facilitation mechanism. Like, what do you do with that? Like, I have no idea. So, and I was sitting there and with the whole list and was like, now I'm going to figure out what these all are about. So what do? You basically do what you learned in school. Well, that's not what you learn in school. This is what when we started designing, I said that all the design should mean something. So that means that you have to find out what the core is of something. So if we look at this again, I found that access to science, technology, innovation, those seem to be good words. And I was like, okay, that's probably it. And then you read it a second time, and then you realize cooperation and knowledge sharing are also really important. And then it becomes this: knowledge sharing and cooperation for access to science, technology, and innovation. And that everyone can understand. So we did this times 169. And if you would ask if 169 targets are relevant for people, or if this is just some diplomats and politicians who are doing things, we can look at a few. Implement social protection systems. That seems pretty important. Sustainable food production and resilient agricultural practices. I picked one from each, and randomly. Prevent and treat substance abuse. Who knew that was in? Expand higher education scholarships for developing countries. Full participation in leadership and decision-making, obviously under gender equality. Protect and restore water-related ecosystems. Increase global percentage of renewable energy. Maybe the most important target right now. Labor rights, safe working environments, universal access to information and communications technology, important for democracy, obviously, but under infrastructure. I could talk about migration policies for years, but you know, with the warming planet, the hundreds of millions of people who are going to be displaced, we can't just, like, what are we going to do with them? Just let them drown? That's not, you know, humanity can't do this, which is why it's very disturbing that we had such problems with the refugees from Syria. They weren't that many. Sustainable transport systems, waste generation. So for 12, I picked 2 because promote universal understanding of sustainable lifestyles. That's kind of what we're doing, so I like to include that. Climate change measures in policies and planning. And many of the goals are connected to things when you, for example, all of the discussions that has been the last few years about plastic is of course directly related to 14.1. And biodiversity and natural habitats, this is obviously, the latest reports are shocking. How we managed to first kill everything else except for us, and then we're going to be next. That sounded pretty dark. 16 is incredibly important because it's a foundation for everything that we build, that we have peace, justice, and strong institutions. And corruption and bribery is the biggest threat to democracies in the world, maybe with the exception of Facebook. That's kind of a joke, but it's not completely a joke. And then we need data, and we need to figure out new ways to measure our success. So there you have it. That's not all of them. It continues down there. But we call this a periodic table of change. Another thing to understand when you start to read the targets is how they work together. Because if you look at target 7.1, universal access to modern energy, you realize that that's connected to literacy and numeracy, because in developing countries, if they don't have electricity, you can't study, because you're working at daytime and then you study at night. And it's also, at the same time, reducing mortality from non-communicable diseases, because the way that people have to cook when they don't have good energy, they burn chemicals and they get sick from it. And then one more thing that's very interesting with it is that when you start to understand the targets, how they work together and how the whole agenda is put together, then you realize that, let's say that gender equality is my favorite target goal. And I actually mean that, because the world we have now is created by men, and it didn't work that well. But how do you have the biggest impact? How do you reach the most impact for women and girls? Well, you would clearly look at all of the targets under 5, which are really good. They're talking about abuse, they're talking about child marriage, they're talking about economic freedom. But how about this then? If you build and upgrade safe schools, this is target 4. And then you build restrooms in them, in the developing countries. Schools with restrooms for girls who, when they have their period, they just bleed. So what do? They stay home, they don't go to school. And in some horrible cultures, they have to go out in the forests and live there, where where they get raped, and I mean it's a horror show. by building schools with bathrooms, then you can affect so many girls. And you see, this is from quality education and sanitation. So all of this is working together. So the targets are really great to figure out solutions also. So how do the targets help each other? We did a project with Stockholm Environment Institute where they put a scale on if the different targets help or hurt each other. So any target, and you understand, I don't know if you are good at math. If you are, you can take 169 times 169. It's a pretty big matrix. So here we've used 2 targets from each goal. And you can see like which targets are helping other targets. And what's really cool that you can do is that you can look at the network influence. You can see which targets are the most important ones. And guess which one gets the most score there. 16.6, of course. Strong institutions. That's really, really important. And then there's only one that's negative, which is 17.11, which is to increase export of developing countries, which is good for them, not good for the nature, for the environment, and not good for sustainability necessarily. So we did the Global Goals website where you can find everything in English and a couple of more languages. And what we hope to do more now is, because we believe that all global problems have local solutions, we can't say that the problems are so big so we can't deal with it, because we can deal with it right now. And we can all deal with our travel, with our consumption, with our recycling. So what we've done is that we have just launched our first local portal. So this is Denmark's. They have their own global goals site. Are you Danish? So, and this is a way where you can have localized information about the goals, and you can see the progress, what's happening, what other companies, organizations are working on. We're very proud that Greta, with the school strikes, is sitting just a few blocks from our office, and we go down there and say hi to her and cheer her on. But there are a lot of forces working for climate action now. The big General Assembly at the UN this September is going to be focused on climate action. And we're thinking if we can get all the forces to work together. So to reach the goal of no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, we have to halve our emissions every decade, starting right now. If we halve every decade, then we decrease it exponentially. So we're working with some people in Sweden to launch something that we call the carbon law, and it's something that Johan Rockström is involved in, and a lot of other good people. And we believe that if we can really make this a reality, everyone is going to win. Because the economy is going to be helped by this. Like replacing fossil fuel with renewable energy sources, that's as big as the internet. That's like a whole new business venture. Like that's so, as big as digital. And for the society, we're definitely increasing our quality of life. We will miss fossil fuel as much as we miss steam engines. It's an old technology. It's time for it to go away. And then, of course, on the planet, taking care of things, people, objects, planets, has always paid off. Halving our emissions makes sure that we have a healthy, thriving planet to live on. So we're working to put together a playbook for business, how they can do this with different steps. And then we're working on something that we hope is going to be a worldwide campaign. And here are some posters from that. Save our climate, halve the emissions, climate action, stand up for a future, halve the emissions by 2030, climate action now.